Hey guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here with a book review for Dead Wake by Erik Larson. I buddy read this with cozy reader Kelly, and I will link her channel down below. This is a nonfiction book about the sinking of the Lusitania, which occurred in 1915 during World War I. The US had not yet joined the war, but German submarines were sinking all kinds of vessels, from the British Navy to merchant vessels. And in early May of 1915, they sunk a passenger ship called the Lusitania. I gave this book 4 stars, and I really enjoyed it. I think, in general, Erik Larson is a wonderful nonfiction writer. I think Kelly gave it 3 stars, but we had fairly similar thoughts. I just enjoyed it a bit more than she did. One of the strengths of this book is Erik Larson's details. His books in general that I've read so far are always so incredibly detailed, almost overwhelmingly so. I think it is possible to get bogged down in those details, especially if you're trying to follow literally everything, because there's just so much that I don't think that's even possible. And it is something that I had a problem with at points throughout this book, because there's just so many details everywhere, from things that are very relevant to all the clothing and jewelry that the people in this book were wearing. I have no idea how he found that out. He is a good writer, but an even better researcher, because I genuinely have no idea how he possibly could find all the information that he included in this book. And at times it was a little too much, but I thought it was wonderful at the end of the day. It really made the book feel so atmospheric and real, like painfully too real at points. And he does such a good job capturing the time period. I walked away from this book understanding a lot more details about specifically the sinking of the Lusitania, but also just what it was like to live in 1915 in general. He captures the individual people of this story, and he really tells you what they were thinking and what they were going through and what their lives were like. And I don't know what it was like to live in 1915. Clearly, it was over 100 years ago, but he really paints a very vivid picture of everything, and I think his details help a lot with that. I also did just learn a lot of information about World War I. I feel like that's something that often gets skipped in school or just glossed over very quickly, because he talks in the author's note about how a lot of people really think that the sinking of the Lusitania led to the US joining the war, and it really didn't. Like, I started this book thinking that we joined the war because of the Zimmerman telegraphs, I think they were called, and the Lusitania sinking. But we didn't enter the war until 2 years after the Lusitania sank. And I'm sure that was taught in school, but I really didn't remember it. I remember it being like point A, point B, we joined the war. And it was kind of unsettling almost to read this and realize how wrong that assumption was. But it was also really important because I gained a lot of new information. I know a lot more about the war itself, and specifically German warfare and the submarines, because I always knew submarines were a big deal in World War I. But this really tells you specifically how they were a big deal and how they really changed the way naval warfare worked. At one point it was discussed how if the US didn't join the war, Germany could have won, specifically based on their submarines and the fact that they could sink all these merchant vessels that really ruined England's economy. Larson also captures the point of view of the German U-boat that sank the Lusitania, which was very interesting. I don't see a lot of non-fiction war books that really capture both sides and do so in kind of an impartial way. He wasn't trying to make the German U-boat look like the bad guys. They were just fighting the same war. They just happened to be on a different side speaking a different language. But it was really interesting to see their perspective and what it was like for them in submarines, because I've literally never seen that perspective before. Not that I'm very well read on the topic of World War I, but that seems like a much less common thing. But my absolute favorite thing about this book is how Erik Larson manages to capture both the big picture of the US entering the war, but also the individual stories of these people. You get to know what Captain Turner went through, the captain of the Lusitania. You know about Theodate Pope, who was a passenger, and Grace French, who was another passenger, and all these other people who either survived or died in the Lusitania. You get to learn all about them and their lives and what they went through on the boat. And I thought that was really wonderful that he got both of those perspectives, because they're both equally important, I feel like. I wanted to know the big story. I wanted to know how the US entered the war and what the political sphere was like at the time. I wanted to know what Woodrow Wilson was thinking. But it was also very interesting to see the individual lives of these passengers, and it was so hard to read the part of the book where the Lusitania was sinking and all these people were dying, and there were just dozens and dozens and dozens of bodies in the ocean. It was very emotional. The final thing I wanted to discuss is just how well crafted this book was. I had kind of an issue with the storytelling and kind of the overall crafting of The Devil in the White City. It was why I gave that book 3 stars. This one I didn't have that problem with. It felt like a very cohesive story. It was very well constructed. I loved the storytelling of this. It all flowed very smoothly for me, even when he was flipping between Theodate Pope, who was on the ship, and Woodrow Wilson, who was in the White House. It all felt like it was part of the same narrative and the same arc, whereas I didn't feel that way about The Devil in the White City. But I highly recommend this book. If you're interested in World War I, or if you're just interested in history books in general, I think it was wonderful. I think Erik Larson is a wonderful writer, an even better researcher than writer, and his stories are so interesting. I really learned a lot from this, and it was such a worthwhile read. Let me know down below if you read Dead Wake and what you thought of it if you have, and as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.